Once upon a time, he flew. Now he walks, slowly, but still full of pride. That sentence echoes in the mind of everyone witnessing the image of Carl Lewis, 64 years old, walking slowly on the training field of the University of Houston, where he once made the greatest jumps in the history of human sports. The morning in Texas covers everything with a pale golden sunlight, and in that space his figure appears, back slightly hunched, shoulders heavy, hand holding a pair of reading glasses, eyes squinting to clearly see each student running on the track that he once dominated. No more cheers, no more 8-meter leaps, no more cameras following the footsteps of a legend, only the sound of the wind and the hoarse breathing of a man fighting against his own body. People once called Carl Lewis the perfect athlete, the most perfect athlete the Olympics had ever seen. 9 Olympic gold medals, 8 World Championship golds, a streak of 65 unbeaten victories in long jump, all once turned him into a symbol of strength, speed, and immortality. He once flew like the wind, light as light, making the whole world believe that human limits were a concept that could be broken. But today, every step he takes is a battle. Knees burning with pain, spine aching, eyes dimming after decades enduring blinding lights and brutal training intensity. The body that was once his pride has become a burden, every small movement a challenge. Yet Carl still comes to the field every morning. He tells his students, "I have to have a reason to wake up." In every breath, one can feel the silent war he is waging. The war no longer takes place on the track, but in his very bones, where time is gnawing away, where pain replaces the applause of yesteryear. But in that slow gait, there is still something unconquerable: pride. No matter how slow, he still keeps his posture as straight as possible, as if reminding himself that the spirit of a champion never falls. Carl Lewis is no longer the one challenging the world, but the one challenging fate itself. He no longer chases speed, but chases peace. And perhaps, in those quiet mornings in Houston, when only the wind and his slow footsteps remain, he understands more than ever the value of life after the spotlight. His story is no longer about victory, but about existence, of a hero learning to live with old age, with pain, and with silence. What remains when a great body begins to crumble? Perhaps the soul, the thing that even time cannot defeat. Carl Lewis's mornings begin slowly and heavily, without the halo or cheers of his glorious years. The early light slips through the Houston window frame onto his body, the body once called humanity's perfect machine. Now, every time he tries to get out of bed, Lewis has to brace his hands on his knees, take a deep breath to gather strength for his already worn-out body. The creaking sound of joints, a dry crack echoing in the silent room like a cruel reminder that time has finally caught up with the man who once ran faster than the wind. He once said in an interview years ago, "It has given me constant pain in my lower back. That pain never goes away, only shifting from dull to sharp, like an endless sad melody in a legend's life." Doctors call it degenerative arthritis. Degenerative arthritis in the lumbar region, the consequence of thousands of jumps and tens of thousands of landings in the sand. Throughout his career, Lewis pushed his body beyond every limit humanity had ever imagined. Every jump over 8 meters was not just a victory, but a heavy blow to the spine, knees, and hips, parts that had to bear pressure 10 times the body weight. After decades, the consequences are inevitable. But what makes the story more tragic is how Lewis faces it. He never lets people see him weak. When the media spread news of his severe arthritis, he immediately denied it. His representative declared, "Carl is in perfect health and continues to train vigorously every day. Even though doctors advised him to rest, he still came to the field, still trained lightly, still kept his smile." That is the instinct of a man who has never allowed himself to stop his whole life, an instinct called deny weakness. Deep inside, he knows exactly what is happening. His body is betraying him, each joint like a worn-out clock, each step requiring patience and pain. But Lewis still keeps in his eyes the gaze of a champion. "I don't let anyone see me weak," he once told an old friend, "because if I start admitting that, I won't be me anymore." It is that pride that keeps him existing, and also makes him endure more than anyone imagines. There are mornings when he sits for a long time on the edge of the bed, head bowed, looking at the legs that were once America's symbol, now dark, veined, trembling from fatigue. He rubs his knees, smiles faintly, as if talking to an old friend who once conquered the world with him. "You helped me fly, and now you make me stop. Fine." That is the acceptance of a man who understands that every glory has a price. But what pains people is how he still tries to keep his rhythm of life as if nothing has changed. Making coffee himself, walking slowly around the field, shaking hands with students with a gentle smile. Those who see him would never think that behind that smile are sleepless nights from back pain, painkillers ready on the nightstand. Carl Lewis was once a symbol of perfection, the perfect human form, as a journalist once called. But time, with its cold fairness, has turned that body into proof of fragility. Ironically, the very body that took him to the top is now the traitor making him suffer every day. But instead of collapsing, Lewis chooses to live with it. He no longer challenges time, but walks with it. Slow, painful, but full of dignity. And perhaps in those trembling steps, people see a different kind of strength, not from muscles or speed, but from will. Lewis fought the world with his legs. Now he fights his own body with his spirit. That is the silent battle. No medals, no audience, just him and the pain and a haunting question. Can one continue to live with the title immortal when the body itself has begun to crumble? But whatever the answer, Lewis still walks, because he understands, as long as he can still walk, that long he is still winning. Every morning the clock strikes 6. Carl Lewis wakes up in the thick silence of his small apartment. No cheers, no longer the hustle of an athlete's life, only the light whistle of wind through the window frame and the dry sound of joints when he moves. Before he can stand up, he has to spend a few minutes just to wake his body. The thing that was once a champion machine, now like an old iron block that needs to be restarted every morning. He sits on the edge of the bed, carefully rubs hot oil on his back, on his knees, then breathes slowly, trying to spread the pain evenly throughout his body to make it less intense. Then he takes 2 painkillers, drinks a glass of warm water, then sits quietly watching the dawn sneak into the room. For Lewis, that is not just a habit, that is a survival ritual. "Pain has become part of my morning routine," he once said, half self-mocking, half accepting fate. When the pain subsides a bit, he puts on a thin jacket, slowly steps outside. The University of Houston campus is still quiet, only a few students running early. He takes short steps, hand-holding glasses, head slightly bowed, as if dialoguing with the ground that once recorded his many victories. Every step makes him feel he is still alive, still connected to the world that nurtured him his whole life. On the walking path, light breezes brush his aged face, and sometimes, in rare moments, he feels peace, a strange peace, not from victory, but from accepting the body's defeat. After a short walk, he stops by the athletics training field, the place that still carries the distinctive smell of sand, rubber, and sweat that he has known for more than half his life. The young students start their session. Lewis does not shout, does not command. He just stands still, observes, eyes cloudy but still shining with an old light, the light of memory. Every time an athlete jumps, body soaring then landing, he sees himself 40 years ago, a young man at Los Angeles 1,984, a leap over 8 meters, the stands exploding, the American anthem playing. That moment now only exists in memory, but every morning he relives it. Only now, instead of flying, he stands on the ground, watching others fly. That blend between pride and regret is what makes Lewis's every morning both beautiful and painful. He is proud that his legacy still inspires, that his students still train on the very path he once ran. But he cannot stop the empty feeling when realizing he is now just a spectator of his own life. He once told a friend, "When I was young, I ran for the future. Now, I walk in the past." That sentence contains a whole tragic life, a life where victory and loss always go hand in hand. The young students often come to greet him, calling Coach Lewis with respect. They smile, ask about technique, seek advice. Lewis smiles, voice low, gentle. "Love every running step, don't let it kill you." They don't fully understand, but he does, because he once let the track swallow his entire youth. Now seeing his back hurt, eyes dim, he realizes that glory is a double-edged sword. It took him to the top, then slowly drained his life force. But even so, not a single morning does he allow himself to rest. Even with back pain, even with knees like they want to explode, he still steps out of the house, still walks around the field, still watches students soar in the early Sunday. For him, continuing to come to the field is not just work, it is a vow. Because as long as he can still walk, that long he is still winning, even in a silent war that no one sees. When the sun rises high, he returns to the apartment, sweat on his forehead, hands trembling lightly. He sits down in the chair, smiles faintly. A new day begins again. And like every day, the pain is still there, dull but familiar. It is no longer an enemy, but a companion. For Carl Lewis, pain is now not the end, but proof that he is still alive, still fighting. Only this war does not take place on the track, but in every small step, every breath, every quiet morning where his heart still beats steadily, whispering to time, "I'm still here." Perhaps the hardest thing for a legend is not enduring physical pain, but learning to live in the silence of the world after the spotlight. There was a time when every major newspaper in America printed Carl Lewis on the cover, calling him the perfect human, the perfect human, the transcendent combination of strength and grace. But now, no one asks about him anymore. The journalists who once chased him have moved on to write about the new generation, and sports magazines call him a symbol of the past. Carl does not react. He does not write memoirs, does not talk about illness, does not demand the public remember him. He chooses silence, as if silence itself is the last cloak shielding the pride of one who was once immortal. But silence sometimes is also a burden. There are afternoons when, sitting in his office at the University of Houston, he accidentally sees a sports newspaper on the table, cover featuring Usain Bolt. Big letters, "Fastest man who ever lived." Lewis looks for a long time. No jealousy, just a faint smile, light as wind, but those deep eyes contain an indescribable pang. Then he quietly folds the newspaper, sets it aside, then returns to the stack of training files. "I suppose it's natural," he once said. "The world moves on, but some days I still wish they'd remember." I suppose it's natural. The world moves on, but some days I still wish they'd remember. That sentence, though light, contains a whole life. For Lewis, memory is both beautiful and cruel. It gives him pride, but also reminds him that all glory has an expiration date. People remember Bolt, because that is the present. Remember Michael Phelps, because that is the new record. And Carl Lewis, the one who once jumped over 8 meters, who once made the whole world believe humans could touch the limits of the divine, now becomes a number in history books. In the evening when he gets home, he opens old tapes again. The screen shows the 1984 Olympics, the moment he stood on the highest podium, hand raised high, the anthem playing. Golden light covers that young face. Carl Lewis sits watching for a long time, then turns off the machine. In the darkness, he hears his heartbeat slow, steady, and between those beats, he realizes the bitter truth. The world only needs him when he wins. When the lights go out, he disappears with the stands. He has never complained, not once grumbled about being forgotten, because for Lewis, Silence is the only way to preserve his dignity. He understands that every legend must fade into the shadows, but sometimes those shadows are so heavy they suffocate. That is the silent pain of being forgotten while still alive. The silent pain of being forgotten while still alive. Every day, he still teaches, still smiles, but inside is an emptiness that cannot be filled. When students call him Coach Lewis, he nods but sometimes wonders, do they really know who he once was? Once, a young student asked, "Coach, do you ever fear being forgotten?" Lewis was silent for a long time, then replied, "No, but sometimes I fear that if no one remembers, then I will forget myself too." The sentence left the student stunned. For Lewis, memory is not just the past, but the only thing keeping him existing. If he loses it, he has nothing left but an aging body and painful legs. Night falls. He still keeps the habit of walking around the training field, where it once was a battlefield. No more lights, no more audience, only moonlight on the faded white lines. He walks slowly, hears the wind through his ears, and feels like hearing old cheers again. Under the moonlight, his figure is thin but steady, a symbol of silent resilience, of pride that needs no recognition. Carl Lewis has understood that there are victories that do not come from applause, but from the ability to endure silence. He lives with it, like living with physical pain, no complaining, no running away, just quietly accepting. Because perhaps the greatest thing in a person's life is not flying the fastest, but knowing how to walk through the years of being forgotten, in silence, in pride, and in the belief that even if the world forgets, he himself still remembers who he once was. At night, when Houston has sunk into quiet, Carl Lewis sits alone in his small apartment, only the light from the TV screen casting on his face wrinkled with years. He turns on old videos again, the golden footage of a glorious life. On the screen, a young Carl Lewis, strong legs, bright eyes, soaring into the air amid cheers, shaking the Los Angeles 1984 stands. That jump once made the whole world believe humans could challenge the limits of nature. Now, he himself looks back, eyes gradually dimming, with time having to squint to see clearly the 20-year-old face, radiant, confident, and seemingly immortal. But inside him, a question rings out, light but sharp as a knife. Was it worth it? Was it all worth it? That is the question he never dared ask when young. Back then, everything in him had only one direction: forward, no looking back. The years of training like a machine, not knowing the concept of fatigue or rest. He once set himself unreasonable limits. Jump farther, run faster, win one more medal. Body in pain, he endured. Soul empty, he hid. Career was everything, and he achieved everything a human could dream of. But now, in the silent room, no one around, he sees the true price of victory. Memories of the public return, not just the cheers but also the criticisms. He remembers 1988, when pulled into the doping suspicion storm. All of America divided, half worshipped, the other half doubted. People did not see his tears falling at night, did not see the times he looked in the mirror and wondered if he was still a hero in their eyes. And then, the scandal passed, but the aftertaste of humiliation remained forever. Public opinion moves fast as wind, but the wound in his heart has never healed. Now, sitting in front of the screen, he sees more clearly than ever. Physical pain is just the tip of the iceberg, the part that people can see. The submerged part, spiritual emptiness, is what has weighed him down his whole life. That is, the feeling of a man once hailed as a superhuman, but who has to ask himself if he ever got to live like a normal person. Lewis once thought victory would bring peace, but the higher he climbed, the more he realized. The peak of glory is also the loneliest place. Every night, he tries to read books, listen to music, but nothing holds his mind for long. Images of the past flood back. The jumps, the cheers, the handshakes from presidents, the gleaming gold medals, all now just distant memories, like an old movie played too many times until it loses color. There are moments when he sees himself as an actor trapped in the role of a legend, unable to escape. His whole life he ran toward the light, but when he got there, he realized it wasn't the dawn, but flashbulbs, light that goes out quickly after the shutter clicks. Outside, the Texas night wind blows through the window frame, carrying the faint sounds of the city. Lewis turns off the TV, sits still in the darkness. He places his hand on his aching knee, feeling each slow beat of his heart. His body now is a map of the past, every ache, every crack, a reminder that he went too far, traded too much. But what hurts him more than joints or spine is the realization. He conquered the world, but lost in his own life. He has lost peace, something no medal can buy back. In his youth, he believed peace was standing on the highest podium, the American flag rising and the anthem resounding. But now, he understands that peace is simply being able to sit in a small room, without pain, without thinking, without having to remember who he once was. Unfortunately, that is the greatest luxury for someone like him. When the clock strikes midnight, Lewis stands up, turns off the light, looks out the window at the field where he still teaches. Under the moonlight, the track appears faint like a time-etched mark. He smiles faintly, a smile both proud and sad. Despite losing peace, despite being forgotten, despite pain gnawing away every day, he still has one thing keeping him tied to this world: the pride of a man who once flew, and perhaps that pride will be the last thing left when everything else in him fades away. Afternoons in Houston always carry a soft, waxy golden light, covering the University of Houston athletics field, where Carl Lewis now spends most of his life. In the middle of the field, he stands there, posture slightly stooped, hair speckled with gray, face etched with the wrinkles of time, but eyes still bright, clear, and steadfast like when he was young. The afternoon light slants over his shoulder, making him look both fragile and strong, a symbol of the past blending into the present. He watches the students run, smiles lightly, his deep and slow voice echoing through the old speaker. Breathe from your belly. Don't think about the finish line. Think about each stride. No more cameras, no more stands, just the sound of young footsteps echoing evenly on the track, and the old coach standing on the sideline. Carl Lewis coaches his students not with lesson plans or technical diagrams. He teaches them with his own stories, with failures, mistakes, and pains no one sees. Don't run for medals. Run for yourself, he says to the group after a grueling session. If you only run for victory, you'll lose the joy. Lose yourself. I was like that. And believe me, nothing is lonelier than winning the world but losing yourself. That statement quiets the air. Then a round of applause rings out, not because he is a legend, but because people feel the sincerity from a man who has walked through the hell of expectations and is trying to save his soul by teaching. Every afternoon, Lewis arrives at the field early, even though his body still hurts. He rubs his back, leans lightly on a cane when moving around the track but never absent. Students know well there are days he has to take painkillers just to stand steady. But instead of complaining, he just smiles. I've hurt worse than this. His very presence, the man who once jumped the farthest in the world, is a strange source of energy for the whole team. A student once said through tears, "Coach doesn't need to yell, doesn't need to prove anything. Just him standing there makes us want to try." Lewis teaches them not just how to run, but how to live. He talks about lonely nights in hotels after winning, about the empty feeling holding a medal but not knowing who he is anymore. He talks about the price of perfection, about how fear of failure can kill joy. I once thought happiness was at the finish, he says, but then I realized it's in the journey, in every do-over. In every day you can still run, even just a little. That statement is not just for the students, it is words he says to himself. Sometimes, after practice, he sits on the old bleachers, watching the young figures jumping in the afternoon Sunday, A light breeze passes, carrying laughter. He closes his eyes gently. In that moment he no longer sees himself as old, no longer hears joints creaking, but feels young again, not by strength but by serenity. Here, he no longer has to run to prove, but gets to live to share. People call it redemption through teaching, redemption by inspiring. Perhaps becoming a teacher has saved Carl Lewis's soul, as if he is giving back to life what he once took. Every time he sees a student overcome fear, every time he sees them leap with bright eyes, he feels something in his heart heal. The old wounds of pressure, of loneliness, of being forgotten, no longer ache as before. They are still there, but have turned into gentle memories, helping him be grateful instead of resentful. One day, a student asked, "Coach, do you ever want to go back to your prime?" Lewis smiles, looking far away. "No, I've lived in the past long enough. Now I want to be here, in the present, where I can still help someone jump farther than me." Then he turns away, walking slowly toward the track, gait limping but radiating a gentle pride. When the afternoon light fades completely, he leaves the field, steps heavy but soul-light. He understands that, for the first time in decades, he has found something more precious than victory, meaning, if in his youth he touched immortality with speed, now he finds peace by teaching others how to stand up. In the night wind gently blowing, Carl Lewis, the one who once flew in the Olympic sky, now walks in the twilight with a calm heart. He no longer needs anyone to recall his name, because every afternoon, watching the young students charge forward, he knows. A part of him is still running, in every step, every breath, and every soul inspired by an old coach fighting pain, but who has never given up. On days without the training field, without teaching schedules, Carl Lewis lives a quiet and small life, but it is the first time in his life he feels peace. In the morning, after the back pain eases, he puts on athletic clothes, wheels out the old bike from the garage. No more long races, no more limits to surpass, just a few laps around the quiet neighborhood in Houston, where he has lived nearly half his life. Each pedal turns slow, steady, and heavy, but in every motion he clearly feels each breath, each wind brushing his cheek, each gentle heartbeat. He once told a close friend, "My body hurts, but I've never felt more human." That statement is not complaining, but a gentle confession. He has accepted his body, even in pain, even no longer strong, but at least he is living, truly living. In the afternoon, he often drives to his son's house, Bakim, the young man Lewis still calls by the old name Blue. Bakim is now grown, working in film, passionate about capturing everyday stories. Every time his father visits, he reheats dinner. The two sit watching movies or old Olympic clips. Sometimes both silently watch the screen, light reflecting on two faces, one aged, one young, like two pieces of time meeting again. Sometimes Bakim bursts out laughing seeing his father celebrate a 1,984 victory. Lewis laughs too, light but sad. He knows that is a part of life that cannot be repeated. But seeing his son laugh, his heart softens. If youth is a series of days running from fear, then old age is a journey learning to stop and love. Lewis no longer avoids physical pain. He lives with it like living with a difficult friend. In the evening, he rubs oil on his back, lies on his side in bed, and smiles thinking of tomorrow. A day he can still wake early, still have strength to bike, still have a son to talk to. His life now is not loud, not brilliant, but real. It is no longer measured by speed, but by quiet moments between pain beats. Occasionally, he walks with Bakim in the park, talking about movies, music, and small things. Bakim once asked, "Dad, do you ever miss the stadium?" Lewis nods gently. "Yes, but not for the victories, for the wind." Then he looks up at the sky, smile kind as if hearing again the old sound of life, the sound he never had time to listen to all those years. It is in those simple moments that Carl Lewis finds what glory never gave: soul freedom. Pain is still there, dull, persistent, like an old clock always ticking in his chest. But instead of fighting, he lets it be. He understands. Pain is no longer an enemy, but proof that he still exists. When biking through the park, wind blowing against makes his eyes sting, tears gently spill, and in that moment, he feels closer to himself than ever. Perhaps that is what youth took away: the feeling of living without needing to prove anything. Sometimes he receives a few letters from old fans, people who still remember him, still call him the legend. They say they cried watching him fly over the sand pit in 1984, that he inspired them to overcome adversity. Lewis reads each line slowly, hands trembling, then folds the letter, puts it in the drawer by the bed. He no longer seeks recognition, but those letters are like the last rays of sun from a long ago afternoon. In his apartment, no more medals hanging on walls. Instead, photos with students, pictures of father and son laughing. On the table, a small paper handwritten, "Don't chase the light, become it. Don't chase the light, become it." That is perhaps the greatest lesson of his life. A lesson that took decades of victories and decades of loneliness to understand. Houston night is quiet again. Lewis sits by the window, watching distant lights fade, hearing wind hit the glass. In his heart, sadness does not vanish, but it has become gentle, like an inevitable part of living. He whispers to himself, voice hoarse but warm, "I once flew, then fell, then stood up. Now, I just want to live slowly, love slowly, and feel everything deeply." And perhaps, in that simplicity, Carl Lewis has finally found what his whole life on the track never had: peace. Even with a painful body, even with old age gnawing away each day, his soul is still free. And when dawn peeks through the Houston window again, Carl Lewis, the one once fastest in the world, still wakes, smiles, and starts a new day by loving life, even in pain. Houston afternoon, the sky gradually turns pale orange. The University of Houston Stadium is empty, no pounding footsteps, no loudspeaker, no audience. Only a silver-haired man walking slowly along the old track, hand holding glasses, back slightly hunched, steps careful as if each is a private dialogue with time. Carl Lewis, the one who once flew over 8 meters like a creature from another planet, now bows his head looking at the surface, lips gently moving as if reciting his own prayer. "I'm still here." Light wind blows, carrying the smell of rubber and sand, the smell of youth, of glory, of the years he once dominated the world. He stops at the starting point of the 100 meters, where millions once watched him through screens. On the empty stands, a few broken chairs lean collapsed, old paint peeling. No more cheers, no more music. But Lewis still smiles. A very light smile. Not victory, not regret, just acceptance. After years trying to fight the cruelty of age, he has learned to let go. He no longer runs, but he is winning the greatest battle of his life. The battle with time, with pain and forgetting. In that moment, he is no longer an icon, no longer the fastest man in the world. He is just a human learning to live slower, learning to listen to breath, heartbeat and wind. The gold medals, the records, the articles, all now just memories. But in those memories, Lewis finds what he never had his whole life: serenity. Perhaps he has realized that true legacy is not in speed, but in the resilience to overcome adversity. He sits on the lowest bleacher step, places glasses beside him, looks far away. Somewhere in the wind, he hears old cheers again. His name called from 40 years ago. Those cheers no longer move him, but like a lullaby of the past, gentle and distant. In the twilight, his image fades gradually, blending into the track, like a part of history. Lewis once said, "I spent my life racing the world. Now, I'm racing time." And somehow, he is still winning. Not by speed, but by steadfastness. Every morning he still walks, still teaches, still visits his son, still smiles despite body pain. He has learned to turn pain into rhythm of life, forgetting into peace, old age into a new journey, where victory no longer lies in medals, but in daring to keep walking. His eyes are dimmer than before, but the light in them is not out. That light is no longer brilliant, but warm, enduring, like a small candle still burning in the night, needing no witness, just to light his own path. That is the light of a soul that has never surrendered. The sun sets completely. Wind blows stronger, carrying a few dry leaves flying across the field. Lewis stands up, hands trembling, picking up glasses again, looks one last time at the empty stands. No one. But he knows, even without applause, there are hearts that remember him, not for records, but for unbreakable spirit. He whispers softly, almost to himself, "Thank you." Then he turns his back, walks slowly toward the field gate. Each footstep echoes lightly on the surface, blending with the wind, like the beat of time. Behind, the sun has vanished, but ahead, the sky still has a faint strip of light stretching. Light not blinding like before, but enduring, gentle and real. It is like him, at 64, no longer glorious, but never extinguished. Carl Lewis, the one who once made the world hold its breath, now only has himself with the wind, with time, and with memories. But in that silence, there is a quiet victory, deeper than any race he ever ran. He no longer races the world, he races time. And somehow, he's still winning. Because in the end, there are races that need no audience, no medals, just a heart strong enough to keep stepping, despite pain, despite loneliness. And that is what makes him a true legend. Carl Lewis, the one who overcame everything, cannot outrun pain or loneliness, but he has learned to walk with them, calmly, slowly, and full of pride. And in that silence, the man once fastest in the world has won the final victory of his life, a victory needing no speed, just the courage to still smile amid wind and darkness. There is a very American sadness in the story of Carl Lewis. This is not just the story of a sports legend, but the story of the price of becoming a legend in a culture that always demands, then forgets. We see him at 64, back aching, joints falling apart, right hand bracing on his knee every morning just to get out of bed, rubbing hot oil on his back because of degenerative arthritis, the consequence of thousands of jumps that took America to the Olympic peak. He was once called the perfect human, once won 9 gold medals, once flew over 8 meters amid the cheers of the entire planet. But when he walks slowly around the University of Houston training field with glasses in hand, no one cheers anymore. We hurt because of that. We ache when we hear him tell his students, "Don't run for medals, run for yourself." That is not just sports advice. That is the confession of a man who conquered the world but lost his own peace. We see him sitting alone in his apartment, watching old videos of himself from 1984, quietly asking, "Was it worth it?" We see him smiling kindly beside his son Bakim, biking slowly despite body pain, saying, "My body hurts, but I've never felt more human." And then, at the end of the journey, he stands alone on the old track, empty stands, wind blowing through, no more applause. But he smiles. For Americans, this must be a lesson. We honor those who win for us, but do we care for them when the applause dies? We teach our children to win, but do we teach them how to live? Carl Lewis reminds us that value does not lie in speed, does not lie in fiery moments on TV, but in the ability to get up every morning, despite pain, loneliness, quietly, and still choose kindness, still choose to continue. If the story of Carl Lewis's resilience and solitude touches you, please subscribe to the channel to join us in continuing to honor those who have surpassed both limits and time. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next video, where we will continue to seek the quiet victories behind the spotlight.